Isn't this just a nice change of pace? We've got this giant jazz box with us today. So this was a model in 1948 until 1957. Now why does it stop at that point? Well, Gibson buys out their competition, Epiphone, and things start to change. Over the years, there were a few different specs of these, and I'm not necessarily a leading expert. I never even knew the Zephyr DeLuxe Regent was a thing. So we're just going to enjoy this for what it is today. So this particular version looks like we've got a regular trapeze tailpiece, no stair step in this here, but we've got the New York mini humbucker style pickups and some funky knobs over here that we'll take a look at on the workbench. But it's a relatively thin neck profile, still C-shaped, but I would say very slim. But it's just one of those really cool old-timey looking Epiphones with their whole Tree of Life inlay pattern, as well as the Epiphone logos. And hey, look at these tuners. Remember how we did that Joe Bonamassa signature that had the weird tuners? This is one of those Epiphone models where those initially came off of. But check that out, multi-piece neck, and it's not a scarfed on heel. That's nice. Because this is an import model, but they are one of the more expensive Epiphones, $1,299. But so far it seems semi-justified. You get the real mother of pearl in the headstock, really nice pearl cloud inlays. We've got that whole dulled down, kind of satin, almost into semi-gloss territory finish. So it just looks a little bit older. And it comes with a hard shell case, as we were looking at earlier. It's got that gray exterior with the blue interior. I'm excited to tear this one apart and see what makes it tick. Let's do so now. Brace yourselves, we're in unfamiliar territory. So they called these the Epiphone New York mini humbuckers, and I just thought they'd be like Gibson USA's put in here at this price point. But no, they are completely different. You don't have any pole pieces exposed, and the way they slide into this pickup ring is unique. So they actually have this little blade bar right there that you slide into your pickup ring through the edge like so. But you can't actually remove it from the ring without taking the solder out because this thing gets in the way. But this just appears to be regular import style pickups, although you can see some of the construction there over on the edge. But here's the next big surprise. There's no pickup routes in this thing. It's kind of like a floating pickup that just got screwed into the top. It just has this little spacer ring over top of it. And it actually appears to be made out of wood, maybe maple, that's been stained. But what's kind of cool about that is if you wanted to turn this into a rockabilly machine, you could technically put whatever pickup in here that you do want, even if you have to route it a little bit. I mean, maybe other pickups could float too. It just depends how much space you need. But I guess it makes sense. These arch top guitars, it's all about the transferring of the vibrations of the top. So not routing it out for the pickup makes sense, especially when you need the extra height on it. But how much do these read? About 8K ohms in the bridge position, neck position about the same, just a little less. Then combining the two of them gets you about 4. Now we can move on to our bridge. This is advertised as a carved ebony. That's a little bit easier to see it raw on the backside. But I thought this was interesting too. The actual part where the string comes in contact with is also made of ebony, but look at this. This bridge is intonated for a wound G string. That's why they all 4 go in a line right here and then kind of swoop down, which I thought was rather interesting because it doesn't ship with a wound G. But you still have your metal thumb wheels for height adjustment. And our trapeze tailpiece, nothing too crazy here. It almost looks like they have some sort of a VOS treatment to the gold, but it's basically just a little claw that your strings go into. Well, this is always fun. You got your rubber grommet around your selector switch to secure it. And now the knobs. They call these things the carousel. And in my opinion, it's one of the worst knobs I've ever had the pleasure of using. Like, they look cool, don't get me wrong, but they're so sharp on the edges, especially right here. We talk about thumb bleeders all the time with the metal, but I could see how that might scratch you pretty deeply. I'm sure it's something you get used to. And I'm very appreciative of the opportunity to get to use it, but if you're trying to do volume swells or rolls, the pointy bit just gets in your way. But it certainly has that certain vintage aesthetic to it. But now let's talk about construction. Without pickup routes, we're kind of limited, but we can see right here on the edge how it's formed. You have a 3-ply maple top, back, and sides. So this is pressed together. And usually what makes an archtop guitar like these really, really expensive is the fact that they're carved top, back, and sides. So when you look at a Gibson L5, that's why those things are like 10 grand. Whereas a ES335 might look similar, but they can save a lot of time and energy by pressing the wood together to give you that slight belly carve to it without having to go through all that time-consuming process of carving it. But so we can see more, let's break out this endoscope. First things first, we've got a sticker in here that says this Epiphone instrument, insert model name here and serial number, was built for Epiphone Incorporated, Nashville, Tennessee. I'm sure that's a reissuing styling of the original. But here we can see the bottom side of our toggle switch as well as the construction. So you got a little block right there with another small one right there by your neck, which appears to be for our strap button, but you can see all the kerfing along the edge. That just helps them have a surface join the back and sides together. But you will notice this does not have a center block in it. It is a full hollow body guitar. And then check this out. It is 3-ply binding on the top. We'll have to see how fancy they got on the back. But again, this is more of a dulled, muted finish. But I really don't want to call it satin because it's still like a semi-gloss to it. They were just trying to go for an older look. And I think it works pretty well on this particular model. But now let's move on to our neck. This ebony fretboard feels so nice and smooth, but you've got 20 medium jumbo frets on this. And as we were talking earlier, you do have the real mother of pearl inlays on here. It is not the cheapy acrylic stuff. It actually looks quite nice. And they're the cloud inlays all the way up until you get to your 15th fret, where presumably it just got a little bit too small. They didn't want to do all the fine detail work and they just put a block in for fun. These are 25.5-inch scale length guitars with a 12-inch fretboard radius. And let's check the neck. 1.7 at the nut, 2.08 by the 10th. First fret neck depth, 0.84. And 0.96 by the 12th. I would say those numbers make it seem a little bit larger than it actually is. In comparison to the body and how chunky it is, it feels like nothing. Which, if you're curious, it's a little over 3.5 inches thick, with about a 17-inch bout. There's that neck at the 1st fret and the 12th fret. Now we get to the headstock. I feel the satin finish leaves the headstock looking not so nice. Because trust me, this is not acrylic, it's real mother of pearl. Shine the light on it and you can see all the colors come to life. It's just this dull finish that makes it not look quite as good as it could, as compared to what's on our fretboard. But you have the old-timey Gibson headstock with their logos. I think this looks quite nice. And they call this a bullet truss rod cover style. One thing about the tuner tips on this one, now as far as how they feel to use and turn, they're pretty much just as good as the carousel knobs. They're rather sharp on the edges, but I mean, if you grab them where you're supposed to, it's not too bad. But I always like to kind of roll my fingers around the tuning pegs, and the typical Kluson Keystone style just works a little bit better for that. But hey, it looks nice and old-timey, and that's part of the charm of this one. But our headstock is also triple bound, and the headstock's binding meets the neck's binding right underneath the nut. But check out this weird pickguard. So it's got that tortoiseshell-like exterior. Well, look at this crazy part. It's like the binding just randomly extends all the way up. Now that happens to hug the neck the entire way, but I feel like they could have just got away with cutting it a little short. But that just must be part of the historic aspect of this one. But that does not appear to be real celluloid or anything like that. You've got a regular black plastic material here, and you can see some of the tooling marks from where they put the binding on. I wanted to mention, this pickguard is so tight on these pickups, you don't actually even need screws to secure it, but they still use it. So you got one right here that has a black spacer underneath, and this Epiphone archtop utilizes 2 screws on the edge. Next thing I notice is I think the wire management could have been done a little bit better because the pickup leads are like insanely long. So they just kind of flop around in there. But it's such a deep body, you really don't see them because it just gets shadowed over. But now let's move along to the edges. You can see your beautiful maple wood grain, as well as over here on our Venetian cutaway. Your output jack is on the side. Before we see more of the same over here on the back. No control access plates, it's all done through the F-holes on this one. And we can actually say that honestly this time because you don't have any routes in the top for the pickups. But here you can see the seam line of your 2 pieces of the body and your bottom strap button, as well as the 2 securing screws for your tailpiece. And here we can also confirm also 3-ply on the back for our binding. And we do have a fancy little heel cap, but look at our neck. It's 5 pieces of maple and mahogany. So it's primarily mahogany with 2 maple stripes with a center mahogany stripe. I think this is why this model is kind of expensive. The multi-piece neck without any scarf joint construction, not even for the heel. But oddly enough, it does look like they throw a block underneath the neck for the top of the body. That's not all one piece. As far as the neck portion, yeah, that appears to be legit. But you can see your anniversary decal, our QC sticker, and here's the backside of those Epiphone tuners. Here's your other strap button in case you didn't see it. But how much does this one weigh? It's not too bad, just under 6 pounds. So let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear it acoustically. it's got okay sound to it. I'm not gonna say it projects across the entire room. Neck pickup distorts really quickly. We roll that down a bit. Sounds a little bit more jazzy. Let's play with that tone control on the neck pickup too. I will give it that. You've got a lot of different tones there. This is very active. Now our bridge pickup. But let's mess around with the tone controls on that. Now, how does it handle distortion? That's weird. I was expecting Squealy City. Let me turn my gain up. We are starting to get the musical feedback. Well, that was a lot of fun. I learned some interesting stuff today. I hope you guys did too. I was expecting this to just be a gigantic feedback, unusable, distorted guitar, but in fact, I ended up preferring it for those kinds of tones. It's a very bright sounding guitar, but that's kind of what I was expecting. But as I showed you in the demo, you can always tone that down with these controls down here or play with your volume controls. There's a lot of things you could coax out of this, especially if you're more of like a jazzy guitar player. Maybe you want to do some rockabilly. Is this a guitar I would personally buy and own? Not necessarily, but that's just because it's not the style of guitar I generally gravitate towards. But thank you, Jonathan, for sharing your new guitar with us, because it was a lot of fun getting to learn new stuff. At the end of the day, it still smells like a Chinese Epiphone, but you get the cool looks to it, and it appears to be pretty well made. The only thing that bugs me is the cable management. You can hear it shaking around in here. But alright, troglodytes, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care.